Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Human Auxiliaries, written by Aware Material 507. Gulvok was not happy. He was not happy about quite a few things at the moment. For one, why did I have to be a part of the generation who has to deal with the galactic-scale war? Sighing to himself, Gulvok continued to check his weapon and other equipment as the dropship which he found himself in quickly descended through the atmosphere. Looking over to his right, Gulvok looked upon his regiment human auxiliary attachment with disdain and wished that they had been assigned with literally anyone else. But no! High Command had stuck him and his regiment with the humans, and now Gulvok and his fellow troopers were doomed to die in a ditch because their auxiliaries decided to run for the hills the moment things got tough, leaving their flanks exposed. Gulvok heard the stories. Humans were nothing but cowards and scoundrels who would sacrifice and ditch him and his brothers in arms the moment things would get hairy. Humans had cultivated quite a reputation for being one of the most common species to find crewing the many pirate ships that ravaged their way across the deep darkness of the void. Gulvok had read dozens of news feeds that contained human pirates who had taken a caravan of affluent businessmen hostage over the mere galactic cycle the humans had been introduced to the galaxy. Why High Command thought bringing some humans along during this campaign would be a good idea, Gulvok would never know. However, what he did know was that he did not like it. The entire journey, all the way to this infested mudball of a planet, was infuriating to say the least, as humans seemed to take particular joy in causing as much disturbance as possible for the rest of the crew and passengers. The humans had made their cargo bay by far the largest section of the ship, and Gulvok had the pleasure of being stationed right next to them, which had caused no end of sleepless nights. Gulvok and some of his fellow troops attempted to petition for High Command to kick out our human auxiliaries. However, they were denied every time, and it was starting to get on Gulvok's nerves. Could they not see the humans would only jeopardize the mission? He did not care if they had to fight without a fifth company of troops. It would certainly be better than having to fight with those disorganized and criminal apes. On top of that, being significantly more physically imposing compared to Gulvok and his fellows, no one was willing to broach the topic to the humans directly. Not that it mattered now that they were dropping into the atmosphere. It's not like Gulvok or his comrades could eject them out the dropship doors without falling out themselves. Gulvok's commanding officer began ordering his troops into formation, and Gulvok vaguely noticed that the humans had already done the same. Looking over, Gulvok was surprised by the humans, who were uncharacteristically quiet while they formed into nice orderly formation, which was much more organized than what he had expected the stupid apes were capable of. Pushing it to the back of his mind, Gulvok looked straight ahead as the troopship fully landed and the door fell open, revealing a war-torn landscape and what looks to be the wrecks of other landers alongside the newer dropships which Gulvok had come with. From where he was standing, Gulvok could see the enemy who he had been sent to face. They stood tall on four razor-sharp legs, had angular carapaces and menacing pincers, all of which combined formulated an intimidating insectoid stature. Dozens of these monsters formed up into loose blobs which writhed and moved in unison, something that only served to unnerve Gulvok and his comrades. The Horogaths had been terrorizing the Galactic Federation for years now, and many worlds had been lost due to their swarm tactics and near completely overwhelming numbers. Gulvok's commander ordered him and his troops to begin spreading out and advancing forward in order to take the trenches which the last wave of Federation troops had constructed before they were overwhelmed. Pushing up forward, Gulvok noticed that the humans' commander had done the same, and the humans had already begun spreading out and taking cover with an almost mechanical precision. This was in stark contrast to what Gulvok had seen how the apes had acted, as they always seemed to be in a relaxed and uncaring posture. However, Now the humans moved and covered each other with a level of coordination unbefitting the loud and stupid primates. Continuing to move forward, Galvark watched as a rogue bug appeared out of nowhere and snatched up one of his comrades before snapping the poor sod in half. Galvark and his fellows quickly began putting plasma fire into the offending bug, which was gunned down quickly enough. Looking around, Galvark noted that the same was happening to other sections of the line, as bugs sound out of ditches to bisect the odd trooper before they even could flinch. Glancing to his right side, Galvark saw that while the other companies in his regiment were losing troops because of the surprise attacks, the humans seemed to be completely unbothered by the bugs as they near instantly blew holes in any bugs that dared to attack them. Eventually, reaching within effective firing range of the trenches, Galvark and his fellow troops began facing the first signs of real resistance as the bugs began swarming out of the holes, only to be taken down by the wall of plasma, which Galvark and his comrades greeted them with. Eventually, the last of the bugs seemed to be finished off, and Galvark was ordered to move into the trench alongside a few of the human auxiliaries, who were nearby. While making the effort to make his complaints vocal, he and the humans dropped into the trench only to be met with a bug, which had not charged out with the rest of their brothers. The Harrogath sprung up and raced towards Galvark, who promptly began panically firing into the bug's carapace. However, most of his shots simply bounced off or were absorbed by its shell. Just as the Harrogath opened its jaws to tear Galvark apart, a near-deafening explosion reverberated to Galvark's back, and a splatter of bug bits splashed all across Galvark's chest and face. Quickly recovering from the shock and clearing his eyes of the blood and guts, Galvark saw the corpse of the Harrogath being scientifically poked with the barrel of the human's weapon, while the human in question looked over and asked if Galvark was okay. Galvark shakily nodded as additional Federation troops jumped into the trench alongside them, and one of them even hefted Galvark up before retrieving his gun, which he had dropped during the scuffle. Muttering his thanks as he took his weapon from the waiting hands of his fellow squad members, Galvark began poking his head up and out of the trench. Taking a good look over the walls of the trench he was in, Galvark could see that the Harrogaths were just beginning to charge towards the trench which he had just finished taking, and this was only further solidified as one of his officers began ordering troops to prepare to open fire on the bugs. Hefting his weapon up to his shoulder before resting it on the trench lip, Galvark watched as the humans began affixing what looked to be knives to the ends of their bizarre kinetic rifles. Surely they don't actually expect to be able to fight off the Harrogaths with a knife. That would be absurd. One of those bugs could and have sliced people in half. But those forearms of theirs, disregarding the humans for now, Galvark took sight on an approaching bug horde, which consisted of hundreds of smaller Harrogaths with a handful of larger ones, which acted as a focus of the hive mind for the others. As Galvark prepared to send off a volley of plasma against the rushing horde, he was startled as a chorus of loud explosions began ringing out to his right. Craning his head to where the explosions were coming from, Galvark turned to watch as a squad of humans that had taken position in the trench section adjacent to himself opened fire with their kinetic weapons. Twisting his head back towards the rushing swarm, Galvark was surprised to see that the majority of the larger Harrogaths had been taken out already, and the smaller hivelings were already beginning to waver now that their strongest connection to the hive had been shattered. It was at this point that Galvark heard the order to begin opening fire, which he was quick to obey, as dozens of streaks compiled of burning hot plasma flew across the open field before crashing into the now panicking swarmlings. The sounds of hissing plasma and the constant banging from the humans' weapons coalesced with the chittering screams of the Harrogaths to create a symphony that soothed the ears of all those who had lost friends and family because of them. The reverie was short-lived as higher forms of Harrogath warriors began charging out from behind the shattered remains of their brethren and closed the distance at frightening speed. Before anyone could react, the Harrogath chargers were but a few paces away from the trench line, which was when the humans acted. Throwing away every warning that was spelled out to them during the pre-mission briefing, the humans jumped out of the trenches and countercharged the bug elites, swinging their blades on their rifles this way and that. Nearly becoming mesmerized by the display of suicidal bravery, Galvark and his fellows almost forgot that they were in a battle before someone shouted to keep the smaller bugs off the humans. Quickly following his order, Galvark opened up with the plasma rifle, along with his comrades, making sure not to accidentally hit their human allies in the process. The Harrogath chargers seemed to be just as surprised by the humans' ferocity, and what was more absurd was the fact that the humans seemed to be holding their own. Slowly but surely, thanks to the humans keeping the worst of the bugs from reaching the trench line, Galvark and his fellow Federation troopers were able to steadily blast away at the hordes of Harrogath warriors. This all came to a head as, with one final push, the bugs had used up all of their reinforcements and were forced back. As the bugs retreated, Galvark and many of his fellows quickly left the safety of the trenches and began carrying the bloodied and dying humans back towards the waiting medics. Many were missing limbs and bleeding profusely as red blood stained the bluish uniforms of the Federation, but Galvark did not care. As much as the humans were annoying, disturbing, and outright infuriating outside of combat during the journey over to this planet, they had just risked their lives to keep the rest of them safe, and for that, they owed the humans their lives. Later in the campaign, when Galvark was sent into the back lines after a bug lopped off his legs, he managed to start up a conversation with a few of the humans who had rushed forward during his first battle. To this day, he has not forgotten the words that those humans had told him when he asked why they had done it. "Well, we knew you lot would not do all too well if the trenches were breached, and it came down to close quarters combat, which meant someone needed to get up into the bug's face and keep them busy so that the guns could keep firing. And if someone needed to do it, then it had to be us." End of story. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.